grab my notebook. I'll be right back.
Awesome. All right. Good morning, everybody. And thank you to all of our MBG family that was able to be with us today. For those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Katie Stinchen, the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild. And I am super excited to bring Shannon forward to share her wealth of knowledge here. Obviously, workers' comp claims are not fun. They're probably something that you will most definitely have to deal with in your brewery. Breweries are giant chemistry sets that humans play inside of. So injuries happen, and we want to try to help you figure out your coverage needs. We want to help you figure out how to create a safety program, how to think strategically, proactively, and hopefully save you a little bit of money at the end as well. So, without further ado, I will turn things over to Shannon to lead us off. And also feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the session, anything that's clarifying. And then we will save time at the end in case anybody has anything else that they want to talk about. So take it away.
Thank you, and good morning. So, I'm going to clear my throat before we get started. We're going to talk about some very basic things about workers' comp. High level, there's no way in a 1 hour, 90-minute session that I would be able to dive into every little bit about workers' comp, but some key things that every employer should be thinking about within a workers' comp program and kind of how things work together to create a good system. These are some key points to start. So workers' comp 101 are 5 things about workers' comp that we should be thinking about. That's me of quite a few years ago, actually. We should probably update this headshot. I'm Shannon Prescott, work for the Richards Group. We are a member of the Guild and are always here to support. So I just want to also reach out that if you have questions after watching this, please feel free. I'll share my contact information at the end to reach out and ask questions. We are happy to help you through stuff as fellow members. So if you have anything that you wanted to follow up on, or I will have a copy of a return to work guide, which we're going to talk about today. If that is something that you'd like access to, we're happy to share that with other members. So I'm the director of risk control. That means a lot of things. So we think about anything that has potential risk to a business. That is what my team tries to prevent from happening. So we identify a type of hazard in some area, a lot of the times employee safety and workers' comp. And then we try to help businesses put together plans, safety programs, prevention policies, that sort of thing. So I'm a certified work comp advisor and a certified occupational safety specialist, amongst many things. I train OSHA outreach programs in construction and general industry. I also am a first aid CPR AED trainer and a mental health first aid trainer. We do many workshops on lots of things. So happy to talk about those as well. These are our 5 things. We're going to break these down as we go through each piece. Again, high level, just kind of basically what is workers' comp? Mod factors, what do they mean? How do they work? Return to work programs and how that can impact your mod factors or your workers' comp program. The importance of incident reporting, and then safety's role when it comes to workers' comp. So if you take an OSHA class anywhere, they are going to say that OSHA has nothing to do with workers' comp, but OSHA ties directly into workers' comp. And I will tell you, as somebody who is an OSHA trainer and a work comp specialist, it absolutely ties together, even though legally they are separate things. Everything about these systems ties in together, down to the same forms that you have to put the same information in. So there's also ways to kind of save time around this stuff. So let's talk about just workers' comp to begin with. Work comp is here to protect workers. We did not have a work comp system until about the 1950s. And even then, it really only protected against like physical injuries like amputation, broken bones, burns, that kind of stuff. It has expanded over time. It covers illnesses. It covers a lot of different things that happen at work that maybe we didn't think about prior, like even workplace violence claims. So there's a lot of different things that can go through workers' comp now. Even in some cases, we're seeing mental health cases go through. So there's ever expanding coverage, and looking at different industries and what they might need or what they're entitled to based on the state that you're in is important to kind of keep up on and know what's there. It's also important that employers understand that you, as an employer, don't get to decide what is workers' comp and what is not, what is compensable and what is not, what to report. The state decides that for us. And workers' comp carriers, as I'm sure if you work with them at all, really want you to report everything. And that's a good thing. We're going to talk about that too. Over-reporting to workers' comp is a better thing than over-reporting to OSHA. Medical benefits are covered under workers' comp for workers. So if they do injure themselves or they get an illness, those medical bills will be covered for them. It also covers things like rehab, like physical therapy, things that people might need to do to get their strength back in a limb or recover from head injuries, those sort of things. And then it covers lost wages. So if they lose time at work, every state has different statutes on when those lost time wages come in place. I will go over Massachusetts statutes in this in a couple of slides, so we'll cover that then. But there's always tends to be a waiting period of at least 2 to 3 days before somebody can start receiving lost wages. So that's a window of time that an employer has to get some control over what this might potentially be in some cases. Funeral and survivor benefits, which is the worst part of my job of working in safety, is definitely fatalities, which we have experience with clients. So there are times where there are fatalities that happen that are directly work related, and there is a small benefit in funeral and survivor benefits for families, depending on, again, the age of the employee, if they had any children, if they were married, what was left of their working life. Some states have very specific guidelines on what can be covered. There is actually a law trying to go through in Massachusetts right now to expand those benefits for families so that not so much burden is put on the family for a workplace accident that caused a fatality. So that's, again, ever-changing landscape of this stuff that we have to kind of keep up on and just be aware of what's available and kind of what happens if these situations do unfold. It's a very misunderstood insurance. This is, in most insurance cases, it's a kind of a simple formula when we look at how much premium are you paying in and how many accidents did we pay out on, right? So how many claims did you have? If your claims start to go above what they're getting for premium, that carrier probably doesn't want to be with you anymore. Or they're going to reach out and say, hey, what's going on? Why are we having so many claims? In workers' comp, it's similar, but not really. Premiums are calculated by your payroll numbers. So workers' comp premiums naturally go up as your business grows because your payroll is growing, because you have a larger risk to cover now, because you have more people working for you. That's organic growth. It's a normal part of business growth. It's something that should be factored in for you. So, remembering that part. But your safety factor, your mod, which I'm going to talk about, is a big part of this. It's a multiplying factor, and it goes directly off of the types of incidents that you've had. So if you've had some pretty severe or significant large claims, or even a lot of frequency claims, a lot of little things that are happening, but it's the same kind of stuff, that gets weighted pretty heavy in a calculation for your safety factor. And that goes in and gets multiplied after they've already identified your premium, and they add that multiplying factor. So we'll break that down. It also depends on your industry class code. So manufacturing does tend to be a little bit more heavily rated. It'll have a higher rate of incident because the jobs that you do are inherently dangerous. So there are more claims. So they will take more premium for those. But you'll also have separate class codes in there for like your office workers, your administrative workers, the ones, that don't cost as much. So you'll see those different rates broken out within your workers' comp worksheets if you're really diving into kind of like how this premium is broken down. And your agent should be going over, again, where the payrolls are falling and making sure that it's correct. Prompt claims is really, or reporting is really important. Your carrier typically wants you to get it reported to them within the first 24 hours. Different states have different timelines on when it needs to be reported to the state. Your carrier is required to report to the state for you. So another good reason that getting your incidents into your carrier, as even if it's what we call a report only, is a good idea, because that report only, which report onlys are, my arm's a little sore. I don't think I really need to be seen, but I'm gonna, go home and rest. And maybe they spend the weekend and they come back and they're working on Monday. And like by the end of the day, you're like, you know what? It is just bothering me. They told you on Friday, and that's when the clock starts ticking. In workers' comp, it's a 7-day process. So even if they weren't normally going to work a Saturday or Sunday, we still count those things as like lost time or from the date of the incident. So it really is the day they report. If they report on Friday that they're sore, we should do an incident report, write that up, call work comp carrier or put it in on their portal and say, hey, just a report only. No medical treatment being sought, but we wanted to get this in there. Those are $0 claims. They don't count against you, and they help kind of create a incident log for us so we can see, are there a lot of shoulder things going on from the same department? Maybe we can jump in on those and take a look at it. It's an easy way to do kind of a claims analysis when we are keeping track of these things. And then on those Mondays, when they come in and say, oh, actually, I do need to see a doctor, you are within your reporting timeline requirements. You've gotten it to the carrier on time. And then as soon as you know it's going to have further medical care or treatment, then you can go ahead. The workers' comp carrier can go ahead and get started even faster, which is good for good for you. You have more control over the claim, and good for the employee because they are going to get treatment quicker because we don't have to wait for the claim to be filed. And there's a whole process with them checking background on things, and it's a process, and it's not always super fast moving. So that's important for employees to understand too, that these things can take time to get information, and workers' comp is not a perfect system by any means. Most claims that you have are also OSHA recordable. So OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, right? They oversee the OSH Act, which is our workplace safety laws. It is a requirement of employers to create safe workplaces for their employees from all the hazards that exist within theirs. There's also some OSHA log requirements. Breweries definitely fall in OSHA log record keeping requirements. So that's a whole other session, record keeping. But not everything that goes to workers' comp needs to go into your OSHA log, and not everything that goes in the OSHA log is going to end up getting paid through workers' comp. So really understanding record keeping and what needs to go to OSHA is important. You do not want to over-report to OSHA. They will even tell you that. Don't tell us things we aren't asking you for. So there's a very specific level of things that they want to hear about and what we consider like a serious or severe injuries. Recordables, and then there's reportables. Reportables apply to all employers, and that's when we have things like amputations or a hospitalization of an employee after an incident or a loss of an eye, and those need to be reported directly to OSHA within 24 hours. Hearing loss is a big one that goes on to OSHA logs and should be going through workers' comp if there's a deviation in an employee's hearing and they're part of your hearing conservation program. Those are things OSHA looks at in particular. And if you have a fatality, or worst case scenario, you have 8 hours from notification of that fatality to contact OSHA. And that includes, even if we think it may have been a heart attack or, was it a health incident, you still have to call and report that fatality because they have to go through the process. For example, we had somebody on a log truck that was fixing some straps, and they had a heart attack and fell. But it was the fall and what they hit on the way down that killed them, and not the heart attack. And that was a reportable fatality to OSHA. So things do happen that need to get reported directly. We have this mass statutes. This is a very small summary. You can go on to mass.gov and read the workers' comp statutes deeper for sure, or you can always reach out. I have some different pieces that breaks down different parts of this for employers as well, like employers' responsibilities, that sort of thing, that I'm happy to share. But just to kind of show you, an employee's notice to the employer is as soon as practicable, and it has to be in writing. And even if they, they give you an inaccurate description of their injury, maybe they think it's something, it turns out to be something else, or whatever that might be, they're excusable in most cases because employees aren't typically doctors. Sometimes they are if you're in the healthcare system, but definitely not in a brewery. The employee's claim filing requirements within 4 years. So an employee actually has 4 years to tell you about the incident. And this is one of the things in the workers' comp system that we're constantly helping employers navigate, because this is a red flag for fraud when something comes back years later and was never reported in the first place. So there's things that we just really want to make sure that you have in place, strong policies, procedures, reporting, that sort of thing, so that people can really, have an easy way to report. So they're not reporting something later within 3 years. The other thing is that employee could have left you, gone to the state directly, put in a claim and said like, hey, I worked at this place 2 years ago and my back's been bad ever since. That's hard to prove. So those can be really complicated claims, even if it really feels like it's not true. It could be totally legitimate. Many people do live with pain for a while before they think they should say something. So strong trainings around this for your employees, and like encouraging them to reach out if their bodies are hurting. If something they're doing feels really repetitive and they can feel it kind of like wearing down, do hazard assessments of those things so that you can prevent, these potential things from coming back later that are hard to prove didn't happen. It is on the onus of the employee to prove injury and medical records. So the carrier tries to get as much proof as possible and then decides if the claim is compensable. But that's, if you ever have something like that happen, you really want to reach out to your agent and see what they can do to kind of help walk you through this, or just stay on those adjusters for information. Employers report of accident. So once they tell you, you have to report claims to the state level within 7 business days if that employee has missed more than 5 days. This is very specific to Massachusetts. Vermont, for example, wants to know if about anything that required them to see a medical professional, which means like urgent care to get a wound flushed. So in Vermont, they really are gathering a lot of different information at the state level. In Massachusetts, they really only want to know about those significant lost time claims, but that's the state. Your carrier wants to hear about all the stuff, right? Because they should be there to help you with their risk control departments, with their loss control people that can kind of take a look at your claims and say, hey, we're having a lot of lacerations this year. Why don't we come in and talk about gloves? Or kind of, do a hazard assessment and see what we're seeing, similar to what my team does with clients. So it can be really helpful to utilize that. And that's part of what your premiums are paying for. So you should definitely utilize any of those loss control services that you might be getting offered. But that's, you have a pretty quick window within a week that you have to get that in. In New Hampshire and Vermont, it's 72 hours. So they only have 3 days as an employer, just to give you a different example. Or maybe you have different locations. Maybe you have locations in different states. That's also something to understand, that, the Vermont location is going to be a lot different than a Massachusetts location for what they get for benefits. Temporary, or the employee's waiting period is that 5 days. So they don't get any lost time payments unless they've been out for 5 days at least. Then they start counting those days and paying out. If they've been out for more than 21 days, then they will go back and they can pay that initial 5 days for them. One thing Massachusetts allows of employers here is to pay those first 5 days as kind of like a deductible, right? So if the employer just pays for those 5 days of lost time, that's less money that's going to go onto the claim. And the lower you can keep that claim number, the better, especially with lost time, because that's really going to impact your mod. which again, we're going to get to. That's our next topic here. Temporary total disability is when somebody is temporarily incapacitated and they cannot come back to work until they heal. There's permanent partial disability, which is they end up coming back from work, but there is partially part of their body that is permanently damaged. It could even mean I've seen something as small as a 1% permanent partial disability on a pinky toe that was crushed, and so the pinky toe couldn't move anymore. So that was they received an award for the loss of the movement of their pinky toe. Death benefits are in here as well. So it goes over again what Massachusetts would cover for surviving family. This gets updated every year. You can see it'll be updated again in September for how much maximum somebody can be paid out per week based on their salaries in Massachusetts, and the minimum per week based on salary. So they won't let them go below $384.50 a week. Minors are always covered. They are covered under occupational safety and health. They're covered under workers' comp. They're not exempt from those sort of things, but there are many, 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 many things that minors are not allowed to do within your workplaces. Most things they are not allowed to do, especially anything mechanical equipment, cutting equipment, hot things, anything that slices, dices. We're not supposed to use those with children. And then diseases are all covered as well. We are looking, I mean, there could be cancers from chemicals, there could be, workplace exposure of viruses, as we learned from COVID. There's lots of different things that could go under that. The most common occupational disease is hearing loss. So let's move on to MOD factors. So a MOD factor, sometimes you'll hear it called an EMR, an experience modification rate, EMF, experience modification factor, just modification factor, MOD. It's all the same thing. Massachusetts has its own MOD system.
To start. All right, we're back on, Shannon. Thank you.
You still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I'm not sure where the recording hit. Essentially, we're talking about if your MOD goes over a 1, you're going to be paying that extra, whatever that is, over the 1. So it's a percentage, right? So this is 25% more. If your competitor who's around the same size, right? Or, you guys are in the same area, you're trying to get people to come into your brewery, they're trying to get people to come into theirs, we're trying to keep costs down. Then if somebody has a 0.75 mod and you have a 1.25 mod, you're paying about $50,000 more in premium if it's this $100,000 premium, because you're having incidents, which are also, there's much more tied to it beyond this mod. But I get questions again all the time about how to control mods, and the best thing is to not have an incident, which most incidents are preventable with, a lot of practice and focus on these things. It takes time for sure to build programs. But it's possible. And then that way, when we do have something, maybe it's something more minor or what we call a medical only claim. So medical only claims are very key to your mod. So if you have a claim with lost time and that person is getting charged with lost time or getting paid for lost time for lost days at work, that claim in its entirety gets counted into your mod. So if it was a $100,000 claim, all $100,000 of that claim is going to go into your mod calculation. If you had a medical only claim, let's say it was a $10,000 claim of just medical costs, they didn't miss any time, they had some restrictions that you were able to find work for them to do, so they're coming in and doing restricted duty or light duty or alternate duties that their body can handle based on the incident, but there's a lot of medical bills. Maybe they had to have a surgery on a hand or something like that. So the medical bills are going to be a little more extensive. But let's say it's a $10,000 claim, that medical bill is going to be reduced by 70% when it's calculated into your mod. So that $10,000 claim actually becomes a $3,000 claim. So another reason why return to work is so important, because if we can provide light duty, if we can provide alternate duties and find things for people to do, that takes down that lost time payment or doesn't allow the lost time payment to come through, and you can get a medical only claim on there and support the people. And there's also many benefits to having people come in and doing light duty and staying engaged as well. Mental health benefits, all sorts of things. Again, in Massachusetts, the first 5 days of lost time can be paid by you, the employer. You can't force them to take their sick time. That is, if this is not a personal illness, this was a work-related incident. So that's something that you technically as the employer are supposed to prevent. So it's not something that you can make them use their personal sick time on. Return to work is essential. So again, getting them back as soon as possible. For you all, getting them back within that first 5 days is key. Definitely getting them back within the first 21 days. But as soon as you hit that 6th day, they start calculating lost time. So that whole cost of the claim is going to be there. So that's actually a pretty extensive time. Because again, Vermont has 3 days. New Hampshire has 3 days. And if that incident happens on Friday afternoon, Saturday and Sunday count in those 3 days. So they don't have a lot of time to get people back to work right away, where maybe they do need a couple days to rest and get in. So it's, they're giving you some time here to help people get back. Frequency is worse than severity. If you have frequency claims, they get grouped together. Even if they're small, they still get grouped together, and they weight that into the equation. The equation for a mod is very long, and I never get into it because you have to see it with a worksheet and it's boring and you would hate me. So we don't do that. Trust me, it's long. It's a lot of math. Know your algebra. And those frequency claims, that means that you're having a lot of incidents, a lot of small things. And eventually in insurance, we call it the law of large numbers. You're going to have a catastrophic or significant claim that's going to cost a lot more money when we see frequency claims. So we want to pay attention to them. We want to make sure that we are mitigating them as much as possible. When a claim does hit, it stays on your mod for 3 years. So it runs the 3 previous insurance terms. It's important to get that claim closed as soon as possible. What they will do is assign reserves to that claim in about how much they think they might pay out in lost time, or how much they might think they need to pay out in medical bills. And they do adjust them from time to time based on, like, oh, they do need a surgery, so we're going to have to increase the medical reserve and increase the lost time reserve because they're going to be out for 30 days recovering from the surgery. Those reserves count into the total of the claim, and that total, even though that money hasn't actually been paid out, it's just kind of being held there. It's that total amount that gets put into your mod, because a mod is really just a snapshot of time. And CCI or the state of Massachusetts will come in and they request from your carrier a snapshot of the claims as where they stand that day. And it's typically about 120 days prior to your renewal period. Sometimes they do it a couple times and they'll update your mod for you. So, but it is a very difficult process to fight them if we don't think something's right or it's miscalculated. And then once that claim hits, there is no, we can't get that claim off until the next cycle comes through. So if you have a bad claim hit you, what you might want to do is just work really hard that next year to get that claim closed and make sure you're preventing any other claims from hitting through safety and all sorts of things, or looking at some return to work. A return to work program is just what it sounds like. Somebody is injured significantly. They have injuries that they need to recover from, and we want to get them back in. You do have to be realistic about it. Not every claim is a return to work claim, like right off the bat within those first 5 days or the first 24 hours. A lot of them do need time to heal, and we have to follow orders with their doctors and that sort of thing. So we do have to be realistic. The goal is to get them back to work as soon as they're available for light duty. We want to get them back in. The more you can limit that amount, that total amount at the end of the claim, the better. So if we can get them in. Supervisors have to be involved. Often supervisors are the ones that know these employees best, especially if this is like a frontline worker. So getting supervisors involved and checking in with the employee, making sure that supervisors understand the importance of staying within the restrictions from the doctor so that we don't further injure them, because that is going to just increase the cost of the claim, hurt the employee further. It's also about, making sure that these things don't happen again. That's another piece to safety we'll talk about. Make it easy for them to report. If it's too complicated, or if it's only, you can only funnel it to your supervisor, things can get muddied. So supervisors need to have clear forms that they can have the employee fill out. Supervisor fills out an incident report, does some accident investigation, so that they can kind of figure out what happened, get those into HR, whoever does the work comp reporting, as soon as possible so that they can get it in. Supervisors should have to have that done before the end of their shift. If an incident happens on their shift, it should be reported to HR before they leave. That should be part of your program. Best practice. That way you can get it to workers' comp within 24 hours. But make it easy for them. Tell them what you're looking for. Just an email of them summarizing an event. You're going to have gaps in that information. Give them the forms. Communicate your expectations. Talking to employees about what their responsibilities are during a work comp claim, supervisors, you letting people know what they can expect from you, where you can help, that sort of thing. Employees do have to participate in the work comp process. If they are not calling people back, the adjuster can shut off their claim. If they're getting medical bills to their house that should not be coming to them and they're not telling us, claims get held up and medical bills are sitting there not getting paid, and it can start to impact those employees personally, and it shouldn't be. So just making sure that we have good communication with them so that we're staying on top of the different things that they're dealing with, because employees during these things, they got a lot going on. One, they're hurt. They might be embarrassed. They might be scared that they're going to get in trouble. There's a lot of different like emotions that go through when something like this happens. And certainly if it's something traumatic that happened, really significant injury, there's a lot of mental health behind this too. So communicating as much as possible is really important. Get a job bank going. I'm happy to send, I have all sorts of different worksheets like this. A general industry one would be just fine for breweries. Happy to share this, of where we can just kind of look at what are things that could be light duty, and what can, based on the injury, what's a possibility here. So we can start with a place. So when we have somebody who can't, stand for too long or can't lift anymore, for a temporary time, what else could we have them be doing for us? And especially in, small businesses and growing businesses, there's lots of different things. And they probably have cool skills that we don't even know about that maybe they could help us with. Maybe they're really good at social media and they can start getting you amped up there. Or I always say your safety data sheets and chemicals, like Katie had said at the beginning that these are chemistry labs, that people are running around in, and absolutely true. And there's some really, really dangerous chemicals in breweries. And so chemical safety is a great thing to review on a regular basis. It's a good light duty job. Get a clinic relationship. Find somebody locally that does occupational health, whether it's through a hospital system or a lot of urgent care facilities have OC health services. Get a relationship there. Have a meeting with them. Invite them to your site. Get them to understand your risks, what you're dealing with, the kind of injuries that you typically see. What can they provide you? What should be ER? What should be them? Get your forms to them. There are medical evaluation forms that you can provide to the physician to have them fill out for your records. You can control this piece, so that you get accurate information based on what you really need to know, for that employee to come back to work. And document conversations. If the employee texts you, you screenshot those texts. Everything really should go through work emails if there's going to be writing back and forth. So I would encourage, I know a lot of people, we have all sorts of apps and all sorts of things. It's just more protective and better documentation if it's coming through work emails. But if you are communicating through other apps, screenshot those, because written texts and Snapchats and Instagram messages and Facebook messages and all of those things are still counted as written communications. So we want to make sure that you're documenting every conversation, keeping a nice, file on claims like this. And again, that employee communication is so key. First off, when they first start for you, going through what is workers' comp? How does this benefit you? What does that process look like? We have a return to work program. So when you're cleared for light duty, you're going to be required to come to work and do light duty tasks. There's, you have a role in this. We have a role in this. Your doctor has a role in this. There's things that, not a lot of people have that gone through. I've been doing risk control for 15 years, and putting an employee handbook in front of an employee, or having them read it on a computer and then signing a form is not effective. Sitting down with them, walking through very specific things in the handbook, not everything in like line by line, but specific policies, key points they need to understand is really important with orientation with an employee. And then if there is a claim, keeping in contact, who's the closest person to the employee they feel most comfortable with, have that person be the contact throughout the claims process. Remembering that this is a tough transition for a lot of people. Again, their mental health is often impacted. If this is a traumatic injury, it might even be hard to come into the place where it happened. Employees that have to respond to traumatic injuries also may have a hard time with this. So there's a lot, again, ripple effects that happen when there's an incident. But somebody coming back to work, especially if they've been off for a while, kind of isolated, can have a real impact on them. So things like an employee assistance program could be helpful in this case too, of just making sure that person has resources. While you're on workers' comp, you also still have to be paying your health insurance premiums if you're getting it through the employer. So they're getting about 60% of their pay normally, and they still have to pay out their health insurance premiums. So a lot of employees don't realize that as well, or employers. And then we get caught up in this, like, well, they haven't been paying their portion. And now we have to go and backtrack and figure out how to get that premium from them. So that needs to be part of the process as well. And that can be stressful for somebody. So keeping this in mind, but don't be afraid to reach out, extra bullet there, to employers or employees that are injured. You don't have to ask specifics about, anything personal or any of those areas that we don't want to, intrude upon as an employer. But when it comes to workplace injuries in particular, these are things that are a little, HIPAA does not apply to the majority of workers' comp claims unless this is a true privacy case, like a bloodborne exposure, sexual assault, needle sticks, which is a bloodborne exposure. There's a few things that are protected, but most of the time we're allowed to kind of talk about these things and talk about what the doctor said, medications they might be on. This is somebody who drives a forklift and they've been given prescription painkillers. We need to be aware of that as employers. So check in. If the employee is truly not open to it, doesn't want it, you can do little things, emailing them like, hey, we're having the employee barbecue. We'd still love you to come by. You don't have to ask about the specific health stuff. You can just, hey, checking in. Hey, our newsletter came out. I just want to make sure you saw it. So, we're looking forward to getting you back, not making it can't wait for you to get back when you're coming back kind of thing, but just making sure that they understand that you're there to support them. You're there to check in. You're there if they need something, and keeping that going. You can ask the employee if their doctor has checked in with them. I typically try to go to the adjuster. If the employee's not reporting, we can always go to the adjusters and just say, like, hey, what's going on with this next doctor's appointment? Let's see the notes. But we often have to push the adjusters to do so. They don't often do it on their own. And that's not me coming down on the adjusters by any means. They're usually very, very helpful, but they are inundated. And believe it or not, they're short-staffed in a lot of places. It's not an easy job to become an adjuster, or be an adjuster. So a lot of the times they have a lot of claims coming at them. So you kind of have to keep poking them or reach out to your agent so they can poke them. Show genuine concern and sympathy. Like I said, again, not when will you return, but we're really looking forward to having you return. I'm sorry you're going through this. Is there, anything you need? Hey, we want to keep you involved. Employee assistance programs, if they can attend stuff, have them attend. Incident reporting. Here's those forms I was talking about. But let's start with one first. This is a near miss incident report. Sometimes we hear them called good catches. Some people think good catch and a near miss are two different things. I tend to agree with that. A near miss means an incident happened. A good catch to me is something I spotted a hazard and we're going to fix it before there was even a near miss. A near miss could be like a racking falling over. No humans were injured, but we just lost material, ingredients, product, because that racking went over. How did the racking fall? How could this be prevented in the future? Was it a forklift that hit the rack and now the rack fell because we just lost like a massive amount of product that was waiting to get shipped out? That's not a good day. That is an insurance claim. That is lost productivity, but no humans were injured. So it's a near miss. If anybody was injured in that, even a cut, it's now an incident that with an injury that we also need to talk about, but we should be treating these just as we treat an actual incident. Is if this happens once, it can happen again. If conditions existed for this event to happen in this area and we have similar areas, it could exist in other areas, including other warehouses, other locations. So we have to then go and look and just make sure, is this happening in other areas? A supervisor's accident report should be capturing as much as possible for an initial accident investigation or incident investigation. So what time they're putting this down, the time of the accident, that's something that has to go in your OSHA log. So we do need to know around what time, like, did the employee come into work and around what time did the accident happen? Because we look at trends with that stuff too. Like how many incidents are happening at the end of shift versus the beginning of shift or just after lunch? We could look at that stuff. Who it was, contact information, if there was any witnesses, because we have to get witnesses reports as well. People have different perspectives. They see it differently. They may have seen it from a different angle. So we want to look at that. If there were cameras on that site, we want to pull any of that video. What was the cause of the accident? So did they do their 5 whys? Why did this happen? Why? Till we get down to like our root cause here. Again, was it a forklift driver and they clipped the edge of this rack? Is this a rack that's been hit by the forklift about 100 times and we've known that the leg was about to go and it just finally went? Right? Nobody ever reported that good catch before. Hey, that racking leg is bent. That's a good catch. It could prevent something like this from happening. We always want to know was safety violated, right? Were they doing something like, was the forklift driver texting while driving and they went around the corner and hit the racking? Is it on video? Were there witnesses that saw him texting? He's not supposed to be on his phone when he's operating a forklift. That's safety violations. Was there potential outside liability? Like, was this maybe you had a subcontractor? Maybe it wasn't a racking incident. Or you have somebody working on plumbing, that sort of thing, and it caused an employee incident. We've had ladders fall over from contractors, or again, like more major issues that happen that could injure your workers. So was it somebody else's fault in this case that caused the accident or the hazardous condition? Anything specific about the site inspection, any recommendations to prevent this from happening in the future, and then a description of the incident with more paper if needed, where they can just go and type in everything that they've collected as the supervisor. That's their statement. And then from there, you would want to make sure that you do an employee incident report so that the employee themselves, the injured person, says what happened. And then if there was any witnesses, having them fill out a witness form, and they all have the same kind of information. We're asking different people. So then we can have all of that information and go, okay, what's kind of the middle ground here, the common themes that we're seeing, getting to the root of the problem from all the different perspectives. It's an investigation. So if you like true crime or like Law and Order. That's how I look at these things. We're doing an investigation. So lastly is our safety. I've mentioned OSHA a few times, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They oversee the safety rules for all private employers within the United States and our territories. They have specific guidelines. An OSHA standard specifically just tells us step by step how to prevent a particular hazard from hurting us, how to properly train an employee around a certain subject. So using forklifts, continuing that example, a forklift would has a very specific training requirement for every employer. And we have to have strong programs with, they're calling them PIVs now, powered industrial vehicles, because there's so many different kinds of them. We have procedures around that on how you need to be trained. You need to be authorized and certified by me, the employer. You have to have somebody that's competent in your vehicles to train, hands-on, understands the OSHA standards, can test their knowledge in a written test. Like there's very specific things. And then you have to evaluate them every 3 years. Or if they have an incident, like they hit a rock and they knock it over and they injure somebody, or they just hit a rock and knock it over. That's an incident enough to pull a forklift driver off of your program, and they have to go through all the training again. If you've been driving a forklift for 30 years over at another brewery, and then you come to me, doesn't matter. Still have to take my training, still have to prove to me that you can pass this test. You could have been poorly trained in other places. Every employer has to vet their own forklift drivers. There is no forklift certification that follows you from employer to employer. They may have done a train the trainer, which they can use to help you train on your program, but that doesn't mean they're certified by you to drive the forklift. So there's an example of loss control procedures. If you have a clear forklift program that outlines all of this stuff and you can show executed trainings and sign-ins and all of those things, there's carriers that will give you credits because forklifts are dangerous and they cause major incidents. So if you can show them that, because you're going to be a higher rated industry in what you do, they might have some extra crediting that they could add onto your premium because you're showing that you're trying to be preventative as much as possible. So you could have access to that stuff. And again, OSHA standards require often that you need written programs in place, like powered industrial vehicles or trucks. If you have more than 11 employees or 10 or more employees, so when you hit that 11th employee, you're required to have written programs of all kinds for OSHA. That's also where the OSHA record keeping piece comes in. 11 is kind of a magic number in OSHA. So once you hit that 11th employee, you need to have written safety manuals, written procedures, written emergency action plans. You become much more compliance falls onto your shoulders when you hit that 11th employee. Prior to that, you still have to communicate those policies, but they'll be okay if you're just communicating them orally. I always say, how are you going to prove and what are you working off of to communicate these things orally? Anyways, it's always good to document. We know based off of many, many studies over many, many years that companies who have OSHA compliant, and nobody's ever fully OSHA compliant, believe me, but we can be our best selves and be constantly looking for it. So if we are trying our best to follow OSHA and identify hazards and, doing the trainings and all of those things, well, fewer accidents, it really makes sense, right? If we're always, doing the right thing and replacing poor materials like a broken ladder or, a bad electrical cord, we're going to have fewer accidents. There won't be those bigger things that happen because it's a safer place to be. And I'll tell you, if you take one of my OSHA 10 hours for general industry, the stuff that happens that causes these major incidents are silly little things that are so preventable, like little puddles on the floor or setting up a ladder with 2 feet outside a door threshold and 2 feet on the inside so it's completely wobbly and people fall off and hit their heads. These things are pretty simple steps that we have to take. You also get more productive, happier employees. This is truly studies that they've done over years. When employees feel safe, taken care of, heard, they report things and you get it done. There's trust built there. They understand that you care about them. We invest in them with PPE. This is for their benefit. we tend to have employees who get the jobs done faster. Their bodies aren't in pain, or they're not working around hazards, making workarounds and those sort of things, and tend to enjoy what they're doing more. It's a better place to be. And of course, it can lower your workers' comp costs, which is what we're talking about today. So you have to assess your work site. That means, like, break it down. Go in.
Did your screen go black?
Do you see me again?
I can see you. It's just not
Okay.
your shared screen.
Yeah, I don't know what just happened. My whole computer just went black.
Oh
Weird.
no.
Having so many fun tech problems. This
I
recording is so fun.
know.
All right, and all my windows just switched. That's so weird. Okay, I'm resharing. There we go. Okay,
Back
so
on track.
jumping. This stuff has happened more times than I can count. And oh my goodness, I don't know what that just did. That is okay. There we go. So assess your work sites. How we start with this, make it simple. A work site analysis doesn't have to be super overcomplicated. You can start with high level things, and then we can work down to maybe the more intensive things. There's certainly something that's clearly a significant hazard, something that could very well go wrong right away, like a leaky gas line or something, then yes, we want to address that right away. But we want to just kind of get a list of things. So you start in one area, pick a room, pick a department, and you look. You just look around, right? Let's start in this area. There's some electrical over here. We have tool storage. We have equipment that might need extra guarding. What are employees wearing for PPE? Are there flying particles everywhere? Are we using chemicals that we could potentially need respirators for, or ventilation? That's in your SDS sheet. So just kind of by looking around and identifying where are there potential hazards, what do we need to dig more into? An SDS sheet will tell you exactly what PPE you need to be wearing around that chemical and how to handle it properly. So we want to dive into that. So once you identify what your hazards are, then you can start developing your safety programs around that. I get asked all the time, well, can I just have a template for a safety manual? And I do have one for breweries, but it still needs to be adapted to yours because it's also going to have stuff in there about like warehousing stuff. Do you have a baler? Do you have these things? Um, do you have a forklift or are you just using pallet jacks? What are we, how big is the brewery? Do you have significant warehousing and stacked racks, or are you, just doing kind of small batches and you're still running stuff out yourself, in vans and that kind of stuff? Your safety program has to fit your work site and your hazards. So I wouldn't want to take, Lord Hobo's safety program and give it to 4-star, right? Because different operations, different things that we would be looking at, plus all the agriculture at 4-star. Integrate into the daily operation. Safety doesn't have to be a big day where we sit back for 8 hours and talk about safety programs. It doesn't have to have everybody coming in at 6 a.m. with donuts to do a PowerPoint on ladder safety again, like we do every year and bore everybody. It should be a daily thing. It should be integrated into trainings. It should be regular check-ins. It should also be like management by walking around, just kind of checking in randomly with people, or like, hey, love to see those glasses on. Like, thank you so much for wearing your safety gear. Make it part of your culture as a positive, right? Because again, it is a positive. It's for them. Investigate all injuries, illnesses, and definitely near misses, and provide training. You do not have a safety program if you just have written documentation of things that you should be doing, but you're not effectively training and communicating those specifics to your employees. You can use an LMS system and have them on there watching a bloodborne pathogens training video, and it's going to cover the OSHA standard, which is a very general standard. And it probably is talking a lot about healthcare and needle sticks in there, which is not your biggest risk. Your biggest risk for sharp and bloodborne pathogens is like broken glass, sharp metal. So we should be talking to them about that. And how do you take care of something? If there is a bunch of broken glass, how do we clean it up properly? And what if somebody is significantly cut? What's the first aid procedures? There needs to be specific training for your business. So templates are great. Generic OSHA standard trainings are helpful, but you still have to take it that next step and make sure that your specific scenario is taken care of. And you also have to audit your programs and your work site. Anytime there's changes, new buildings, new equipment, we got to do another assessment. If you have certain programs in place like lockout, tagout, for example, you have to audit that annually for each set of lockout, tagout procedures for each set of equipment. So just making sure that you're always auditing. I would say anytime you do a lockout, tagout, if you're filling out a checklist, you're auditing your program at the same time that these steps are still effective or accurate to what you're doing. And then there's psychological safety. I do a whole workshop on this as well for a few hours where we dive into what this means and kind of how do we develop psychological safe environments. This means that we're creating an environment that is safe for people to speak up, share ideas, report problems, have hard conversations. Doesn't always mean somebody's going to get their way in those conversations, but at least they know they can have the hard conversations, that they're allowed to disagree or offer different ideas. Because when we don't have this, our programs don't work because people don't feel like they're going to be heard. And then our frontline workers who often have the best ideas or know the hurdles that they're having or see the unsafe conditions don't feel like they can report these things. Especially when trust has been broken over time. So psychological safety is a lot about trust building, making sure that if you say you're going to do something, that you actually do it and build that trust. It takes a long time to build trust with employers or with employees. There was a Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago. It was like 81% of employees don't trust their direct supervisor. And that's a problem. They need to, right? So how do we build that trust? There's actually Harvard has done a lot of studies around trust in the workplace. Develop those supervisors and managers with these kinds of trainings. There's a great book, The Fearless Organization. Do a supervisor's book reading club. Let's read them all together. Or for our smaller breweries, like especially as owners, reading these things and just kind of understanding maybe what have I done in the past that could create an environment that isn't as psychologically safe? What could I do to be better? How could I develop my supervisors? Maybe I'm seeing some of these things. The book is wonderful, but written by Dr. Amy Edmondson, The Fearless Organization. And keep in mind that mental health issues are more prevalent than ever before, and having a psychologically safe environment means that we're also going to get those potential issues brought to us. So maybe we can help support a better work-life balance for employees. There is a study out there. This was done through Marsh Risk, which is a very large insurer. 3% of workers account for 22% of the workplace accidents that we're seeing, which means we have accident-prone workers that are having multiple incidents. And they dug into those 3%, and they found that the majority of them were finding that these employees were struggling with some sort of mental health challenge, temporary stress, financial stress, family stress, medical issues. Typically only lasted 6 to 12 months. And when those employees were supported, they were able to come back as their better selves and they stopped having incidents. So sometimes when an employee starts having a lot of incidents, behavioral, productivity, absences, maybe we need to do a check-in with them on their mental health. And this is from the OSHA website. So again, OSHA's paying attention to mental health in the workplace as well. They have flyers on this, employee resources on this. I think a big one here, for every $1 spent on ordinary mental health concerns, we see a $4 in return in productivity gains. There's a lot of research out there about this and what this can do in causing physical injuries with employees. So it's a key thing. And OSHA also partners with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention now, because we're seeing more suicide at work, unfortunately. Things we need to talk about within the workers' comp space. And there's even a class, it's a full day first aid class, mental health first aid. So that you can get your employees trained, supervisors trained on how to better identify when somebody might be struggling, how to approach it, how to ask questions, especially within the work environment. And that said, we still managed to finish just beyond the hour,
Thank you so
despite
much.
our little tech glitches. So,
We did
um,
great.
happy to answer any questions. That's my email. Again, feel free to email me after to ask. I also have that return to work guide that I'm happy to share. But yeah, do you guys have any questions?
I actually do have a question. So I work as the director of people operations at Hendler Family Brewing, and so obviously my job goes just, or my brain goes to risk, which is a huge part of what we're talking about. I think my question here is around mostly the return to work programming. Are there certain compliance requirements around return to work programs? Would that be designated from like a multi-state situation? Is that designated by OSHA? If we do it, how do we know that they're limited work versus like how do we assess that? Especially if someone, for instance, is dealing with like a mental health issue or an emotional issue, grief. Like how would you then assess what's doable versus what's not? Is that up to the employee? So yeah, just kind of like just really wanting to understand some more about maybe some of the compliance boundaries or limitations around the return to work.
Well, they're physically injured, so there's some disability around it. ADA applies when somebody's out on a work comp claim as well. So we might need to do some reasonable accommodations to get somebody back in. That's also what light duty is like a reasonable accommodation. It's just under kind of workers' comp bucket. So the first step is getting them to a doctor that can assess what are they capable of, if anything. And if it's, physical, that's one thing. If it's a mental health thing, there are times where we need, is it a psychologist, a psychiatrist? Is this their therapist that they see on a regular basis? And we have essentially doctor's notes
Documentation.
as well of what does this need to look like for them. Maybe they can only work, you know, a partial day. That could be a physical or a mental health thing. Maybe they need to work remote for a little bit. Maybe they do just need that time off. So
Does
the
that need to
doctor's
be
the
in
one
the
who really
handbook and
sets it.
codified? Like, hey, for me to apply this return to work for your workers' comp, it's required that you provide a doctor's note letting us know what these accommodations are. Okay.
It's just like if you were going to do an FMLA claim,
Right. Okay.
right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I just
Same
wanted to
lines.
make sure it's okay for me to
Yeah,
ask for that.
yes. And in workers' comp, if it's truly a work-related thing, so I had a bad incident, grocery like co-op store. Somebody had self-harmed in the bathroom, and it was accidentally too much. So they became a medical emergency, and three of the employees, we had actually just done the mental health first aid class. So three employees went to address the first aid portion of it, get that taken care of. EMTs there, person was fine, but significant trauma on the three first responding employees. That was the first workers' comp claim I saw in New Hampshire that was covered. They covered the lost time for those employees because they had some trouble coming back to work within the first couple of weeks, understandably. So
Sure.
the state actually approved that for them. Usually we see that for first responders. So it's always, like I said, just report it. Workers' comp will decide what's compensable and what's not. The employee also, there's an appeals process if they truly believe this is something that was directly work related. And we need more of those so that we can change things and expand coverage for employees with these new risks, right? Because that can happen anywhere. So your return to work program is not like a state statute. It's not a workers' comp statute that you're required to do so. It's a best practice to have that program in place. Within workers' comp, you can ask a lot more around like medical treatment and getting specifics on what you need for accommodations because it is work related and it's directly your responsibility to fix it and get them back to work as soon as possible. If we're just paying them to be out, you are doing no favors to your mod. So like I said, even if it's not possible within the first couple of weeks to get them back, as soon as it is, we want to make sure that we have stuff ready for them and supported. And it can look like, well, you could do these tasks for us remotely. You could come into a different location maybe going back to that space is not going to happen for them, depending on what's happened. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
If I could ask one more quick question.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand, um, are there any sort of, I guess, two categorization questions. The first one is, you had mentioned before that we should be thinking about the types of industries or businesses that our organization touches, and to kind of understand what the safety requirements or guidelines around that are those categorized? Should we be thinking in like OSHA standards of like manufacturing, architecture, or excuse me, agriculture, specifically those standards, not just like, you know, these guys do customer service and et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. So
Okay.
there are 4 different OSHA standards. There's general industry that applies to all employers, and manufacturing definitely falls under that, and breweries are under manufacturing. Um, the then there's, like somebody like 4 Star Farms. She's not here, but we'll keep talking about them. And so they have the agricultural component
They're the
as
best.
well as their manufacturing component and the retail component and the hospitality component, right? Which is a lot of this business. So if you have agricultural operations, you have to look to the agricultural standards. If there isn't a standard under that, we look back to general industry. So
Okay.
it's more about the task that's being completed by the employee versus kind of what you're classified as an overall business.
Got it. That's helpful, because then it's like you can just look up an index versus trying to figure out what you're touching versus not. Um, I'm going to, does anyone have any other questions? I'm going to take over a little bit as host, since I am part of the board of the Mass Brewers Guild. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I just at least want to say thank you so much, Shannon, on behalf of the Mass Brewers Guild. It's really awesome to have these sorts of opportunities provided for our larger base. I think these classes are really helpful, and hopefully someone gets something that's helpful out of this recording. Thank you so much again for sharing your contact information, and to our members, I highly encourage that you reach out to Shannon if you have any questions. Feel free to network with ourselves within the group to kind of figure out ways that we can do this better, and encourage each other to find better ways to lower our premiums ultimately. So thank you so much again, Shannon, and we hope to see you guys in the next webinar coming up soon.